powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and is brought to you today by the Gallery Bar Book and Games. We're live here every Monday, and we will be throughout the football season. Super Bowl, of course, is mid-February. We'll be here right at the Gallery Bar Book and Games, the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher will have a Mosher Monday for the Football at 4 in just a second from InsideTheBirds.com. And obviously we'll get Mosher's take on what we saw yesterday and how much stock he puts into the Eagles and what they looked like yesterday, Geoff. Obviously, you know, they won the game. They were up 16-0, 19, whatever it was. I mean, it almost looked like they just vanillaed their way through that game yesterday and just said, look, we have more talent than you, and we're going to strip it down and let our talent just kind of push us through this game. We got through without anybody hurt. Or do you look at it a little differently and take some concern moving into the playoffs after what we saw yesterday?
No, I have some concern about moving into the playoffs, but it's not really from what we saw yesterday. I think, and I'm a little surprised by some of the reaction, you know, whether we've gotten on social media or just sports talk or whatever, that people are surprised that Jalen Hurts was either, you know, not given the full reins of the offense the way you normally would be, or was not as sharp as you would expect. I mean, we've said all along, especially on this, talking to you guys and then on Inside the Birds, we said this was not a typical shoulder sprain. It was somewhere between a grade 1 and a grade 2, from what we understood. And there was also some collarbone issue in there. And so it was looking like an injury that's going to be 3-5 week type injury to be 100%. So we're only 3 to 4 weeks into it. He's clearly not 100%, but he is good enough to throw a football. They determined that last week, and they needed him to get out there and play the position. It helps that you get out there and you get your arm back into shape. That's part of the process of getting ready. So I'm not, he clearly was off. He clearly didn't have the torque on all of his throws that he normally did. And more importantly, you guys saw on the first or second drive where he had a chance to climb the pocket and run, he just slid and took a sack. So yeah, he was protecting his shoulder, and that totally changes what they do offensively. Now, 2 weeks from now, when you're closer to 5 weeks from the onset of the injury, then I think you're going to see a more healthy and stronger Jalen Hurts, who's got more reins to the offense of what he can do. If you don't, then yes, we should all be concerned. But I think he's on the right trajectory for where he's supposed to be within the timetable of this injury.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of wondering earlier, somebody texted in and said, are you concerned about them in the red zone yesterday and against the Giants' second team? And I said, well, I would imagine the offense in the red zone was altered by the fact that they just did not want him to run. That RPO portion of the offense appeared to not be, especially where it's really effective, which is in the red zone.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not trying to make any defenses for the Eagles, but just for the purpose of facts and reality, like, yes, it was the Giants' backups, but guys who made plays like Dane Belton or Jason Pinnock, those guys are backups, but they've been starting for the Giants for a little bit now because of all the injuries the Giants have had on defense. So it's not like they just put a bunch of Davis Webbs out there who are literally just making first start of the season. Those guys, the Giants have had to play a ton of backups this year. And so this is the second time a lot of those guys have seen the Eagles offense, and of course a scaled down version of what their offense is. So yeah, they stumbled in the red zone because they were not, their RPO game was okay, but it's not as effective when the defense doesn't think that Jalen's going to run. That also goes for not just the RPOs, but the zone read element of what they do in the running game and the quarterback design run. So yeah, I mean, I think you put it best. They kind of just went out there and kind of got the win in a really vanilla way, but all they needed to do was win the game.
Now, a lot of talk and concerns around Jalen Hurts, Moshe, but Lane Johnson is obviously someone that is a huge deal as far as his role and impact on the Eagles and the outcomes of their games here. Let's just assume he's not able to give it a go. He tries to give it a go in the divisional round. Not successful, sort of glass half empty type of question here. How do the Eagles, how does their approach change without Lane Johnson?
Yeah, first off, I'm not even sure that it's a glass half empty question more than it's an honest reality of the situation based on what we understand. I mean, he's playing with a torn adductor tendon that you already know is going to need surgery, and he's going to go out there. And from everything I've talked to with coaches, players, people who've seen this injury, it's not just a pain tolerance issue. It's range of motion. It's how much can he do of what he normally do? How much of Lane Johnson, of the real Lane Johnson, are you getting out there while he's playing? And to your point, a lot of people question how long he can make it through a game because with some injuries, they say you can't make it worse. You just got to deal with the pain tolerance. With this one, you can absolutely make it worse. You can rip the tendon off the bone and have a longer surgery. So it's a fair question. And I think it's my biggest concern as you guys are talking about what your concerns are, way more than Jalen Hurts, because I mean, you're talking about maybe the best player at the league. No, definitely the best player at the league at his position, and maybe the best overall offensive lineman in the league. And I think you guys have all seen the stats of what the Eagles' winning percentage is throughout his career when he's on the field as opposed to off of the field. It's not a be-all, end-all stat. It's a little bit kind of like one guy does not just control wins and losses, but in the playoffs and protection and things of that nature. And when you're dealing with a guy like a Bosa or, maybe a Thibodeau or whoever they play in the first round, Micah Parsons, right? You need your best protection. And I just don't – you guys have seen it. You put Jack Driscoll in there, and the drop-off is pretty big. And I thought in general yesterday, I'll wait till the All-22 comes out. The Giants blitzed a lot, as they always do with Wink Martindale, so I don't want to blame everything on the O-line. Sometimes it's on the backs and the tight ends and your quarterback to pick it up. But you can tell in the last two games that there have been times where protection hasn't been what you expect it to be from this offensive line, and I think you trace a lot of that to Lane's absence. And then, once you get into the playoffs, that's huge. It's critical. You're going to face some really good defenses and really good pass rushers.
Moshe, I talked about this a little bit earlier, and I want your opinion on it. The defensive line, 4 different guys with double-digit sacks. It's just been a remarkable season for that group. And then offensively, what Davante's been able to do alongside A.J. Brown, both historic seasons. So the big boys up front on defense, or Smith and Brown, who's had a bigger year and which is more impactful for the Eagles' success or dependent on the Eagles' success moving forward, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, those two guys, Smith and Brown, are – I don't know. I mean, you guys have grown up in the area. I've been here a long time. I've covered the team for a long time, but I've never, as an Eagles reporter, seen a combination like this for the Eagles. It ain't Jackson and Macklin. That was a pretty good combo. This playmaking duo is just special with what they can do, how they're technicians, how they can get to every ball thrown their way. They're different receivers, but they both get to the ball extraordinarily well. And I actually, as great and talented as A.J. Brown is, I think over the last 6 or 7 weeks, I have marveled at some of the catches Devontae Smith has made simply because of his frame and size. And he's not a burner either. I think he didn't run the 40 coming out of Alabama because, he probably didn't want people to know he's maybe just a 4.5 guy. Like, oh, no, just 4.5. But he is really special. He's really unique, too. And those two guys are going to be a problem. And I think the only set of weaponry in the NFC that can even match what the Eagles have when you add Goddard and Sanders in the mix is San Francisco's. They've got Debo, they've got Kittle, they've got McCaffrey, they've got Ayuk, who's a really nice player as well, good offensive line. But their quarterback's Mr. Irrelevant, and the Eagles' quarterback is an MVP. So, and that's not to take away from Purdy. He's played really, really well. But I think a lot of us think that when he gets to the playoffs, at one point, he's probably going to look like Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, and struggle a little bit, I would think.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds. We're talking a lot about the offense. It just came down officially. Not a surprise, it seems, that per Adam Schefter, the Texans officially have put permission in to interview D'Amico Ryans and Jonathan Gannon. Jeff, the fans don't seem to like Gannon very much. But talk about the significance of that. Why do teams look at Gannon, a guy who's not very popular, with the second overall defense in the league? Why is he viewed around league circles as a head coaching candidate?
I mean, some of what I think this year, what he's done this year, the stats look really good, but I don't even think that's matters much because he got interviews last year, right? Even when the defense was very just average. He has a great reputation around the league. In fact, one thing we reported a lot, I guess 2 years ago now, on Inside the Birds is that when Jeffrey Lurie was interviewing Nick Sirianni, Jeffrey knew who Jonathan Gannon was. And, Jeffrey prides himself on knowing who the young upcoming coaches are in the league. Jonathan Gannon has had a very good reputation as a future head coach since his days in Indianapolis when he was a defensive backs coach. So it's, again, a lot of teams, it depends on what they look for. Teams don't always look for scheme when they're hiring. They're looking for personality. They're looking for connectivity, just like Jeffrey Lurie. They're looking for a leader, someone who can galvanize a locker room. And Jeffrey Lurie saw that in Nick Sirianni, right? He didn't see a great play caller because Nick Sirianni didn't call plays in Indianapolis. So teams that are looking for that, there is the vibe that this is what Jonathan Gannon can bring to a locker room, I think more so than what he does schematically. So I don't even think this year helped him, of course, but again, he's had interviews going back to last year. I think that his reputation is what's getting him the job more than what he's accomplished this year as a defensive coordinator.
Moshe, I know we only have you for a couple more minutes.
No, we're good. I can stay longer. I'm sorry. I meant to tell you guys, I can do the full show today.
Oh, he's not bleeping leaving. All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds. Little Wolf of Wall Street there. All right, so I was going to ask you quickly, but I'll still ask you. With NFL Week 18 now in the books, the weekend was obviously filled with a lot of storylines. But with the AFC and NFC playoff bracket set, we'll stick with the NFC. How do you see it playing out? Is there a matchup where you say, I can see the underdog and I predict the underdog to get the win? Outside of Dallas.
Yeah, although after Dallas played the way they played against Washington yesterday, I'm not quite sure. That it seems like whoever wins the 4-5 game is just they feel like a team that's really not going to go very far in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, how much stock do you put in their first meeting, if at all? I mean, Tampa dominated that game
in the season opener.
Yeah, 19-3. I mean, Dallas.
I just don't put a whole lot.
Dallas couldn't move the ball.
It feels like years ago.
Yeah, wasn't Dak hurt in that game, and then he wound up missing the next
He got hurt in that game. Yes, later in that game. Yeah.
Plus, they were not using Tony Pollard then the way they use him now. They didn't have Michael.
They didn't use him yesterday for sure because my fantasy team.
I know. I know. I don't know what's going on with that team. So I don't have a whole lot of confidence that Tampa Bay's got one great run left in them either. So if you're the Eagles, you're literally hoping that there are no. Honestly, I think you're probably hoping that the Vikings take care of business against the Giants and that the Seahawks are getting rid of by the Niners because you'd like to play either Tampa Bay or Dallas the way they ended the season. Plus, a little bit about both those teams there. But I don't really think – I know the Giants are a trendy pick because they played Minnesota a couple of weeks ago and they only lost by 3. But
Giants stink.
You got to score points to beat Minnesota. I mean, and I don't know that the Giants are going to be able to do that. And I really don't – I don't think – the only thing about the Seattle-San Francisco game is things can get weird when division rivals meet up. But I kind of think that that'll be a San Francisco game. Regardless, their defense will be too good. So, no. But, I mean, if the Giants do upset the Vikings, I mean, the Eagles can be happy about that because then they're playing the second lowest seed in the entire playoffs at their place in the divisional round.
You talked about the Dallas game yesterday. Just throwing this out there. I'm sure you saw it, maybe not. But Dak is the first the first player in NFL history to lead the league in interceptions and missing 5 games or more.
That is amazing.
Right? I mean, it's remarkable. Like, this dude is just the definition of Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah. Now, I have watched a decent amount, and I know that, do you guys remember the year Eli Manning led the league with like 22 interceptions and literally like 13 of them bounced off receivers' hands into other? It wasn't like not as bad as it seemed. I feel like Dak got bit by that a little bit this year. He's had about 5 or 6 that I can remember right off the bat that were literally right in the hands of his receiver, then out, then into the other guy's hands. But I still think even when I just in general don't think he has played great football this year. I don't think he has looked to drive the football, and probably because Gallup has been coming back from the ACL and CeeDee Lamb is really not an outside vertical threat. And so maybe he really misses that Amari Cooper type presence out there. He sort of reminds me, he's playing the game like Alex Smith did, just kind of trying to hit the middle and dump offs and everything like that. And then when he does try to let loose a little bit, seems a little reluctant, and you've seen those interceptions. I don't know if those bad habits all year are just going to change in a finger snap.
I mean, I know that the Eagles don't play this week, so you're looking at different opponents, but the last time they played, Dak had maybe his most successful day. What do we read into that? He has all these interceptions, yada, yada, but yet he's 24-24 against you.
Yeah, no, that was not a great day for the Eagles defense. No doubt about it. And, I'm sure if they play again, if that's what it happens to be, the Cowboys are going to feel pretty good about their ability to move the ball against the Eagles defense. And then I'm sure, if you're Jonathan Gannon, you're going to have to make that adjustment that he made after halftime a little bit sooner. Like maybe, start the game in a different, doing some things differently schematically. And now you have C.J. Gardner-Johnson back, which might give him the ability to do some things differently than he has been doing lately.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. One of the other things, as we kind of hint, we looked at Hurts and Lane Johnson. Yep. Josh Sweat, Avonte Maddox. What do we think about the possibilities of those guys being able to play in 2 weeks?
It's my understanding Josh Sweat's good. I think if they were playing in a playoff game this weekend, he would have played or like an elimination type game. So it's my understanding he's okay. We'll see how the injury report looks. Well, it won't even be this week. It'll be next week, so more fine. Who's the other guy you asked me about?
Maddox.
So this is interesting, right? When he first got hurt, we were told it was a nasty toe injury. Involved, from what I understand, a fracture and then even some tendon issue there. He had a procedure, and it seemed like there was just no way this guy was going to be back anytime soon or for the rest of the year. But we did note last week that he is not on crutches. He was in a boot, but not on crutches. And he never went on IR. If you go on IR, you got to miss 4 games. So we would have missed the Giants game. And then obviously the bye week doesn't count, right? So you miss divisional, conference. Wait, am I missing one? It would have been 2 games. It would have been not just the Giants game, but the week 17 game as well. I forget already who New Orleans. Right. He would have missed those 2 games. They would have missed the divisional and then the conference championship if they had put him on IR. So they must feel like there's a chance he can be back for the conference championship, if not the divisional round. So that's great if he can. Obviously you'll have to wonder about the conditioning, everything. Like, is he able to get out to the practice field before that? Right now, all we know is last time we heard he was in a boot. So he's obviously not on the practice field, and we'll have to see if he's making even speedier recovery. But I certainly wouldn't hold my breath that he's going to be there for the divisional round.
The Texans, by the way, have also requested permission from the Eagles to interview offensive coordinator Shane Steichen, as well as Gannon and D'Amico Ryans from San Francisco. And
I'm sure that's not awkward in the inside the NovaCare complex. Hey, how'd your interview go? Oh, man, I think I killed it. How'd yours go? I killed it too.
Well, and keep in mind, guys, John Gannon interviewed with them twice last year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's already been through it twice with them. They also interviewed Josh McCown last year and ended up going with Lovie Smith. I mean, I don't know. If you're a head coaching candidate, it's one of those things. It's like,
how do you go to Houston?
It's like, right, how do you take that job, but you don't know where else you're going to get that opportunity? It's such a hard scenario where you're like,
I'd rather coach high school.
I want to be a head coach.
Yeah, people have said, where's the accountability for what Houston is doing? And I think the accountability is the fact that, no one's actually going to hold them accountable. I mean,
why? The NFL, Moshe, I brought that up a few minutes before we had you on to Gil. I said, at what point does Roger Goodell step in? Sort of like the NBA did with Hinkie and the Sixers. Like, in all seriousness, though.
It's a great point. I don't know that it's going to happen because I just don't think that the 31 other owners give a crap enough. But the accountability for Houston, Ryan, will be that Sean Payton will never take that job. They're either going to have to hire a retread who has nothing, no options, like Lovie Smith or like Mike McCarthy, right? Something like that. Or they're going to have to hire such a young, unproven guy like a Jonathan Gannon or a Mayo or whatever,
or like
and
a
hope
Jeff
that
Saturday.
that works out. Right? Yeah, or like that. They will not get anybody.
Well, no, I mean, they tried to get Josh
some type of
McCown.
security.
They tried to get McCown, who I think realistically they just couldn't. He had only coached high school football, and they were like, can we really do that? You're going to have to get one of these coordinators who is like, who else is taking me unless it's the worst franchise in football? And I'm just going to have to try to overcome the insurmountable odds and impress people.
That's the thing, though. Like, all right, let's say you're D'Amico Ryan. There's a certain level of coordinator. D'Amico Ryan's going to be a hot candidate. This is not going to be his only job interview. No. He may get offered that Houston job and be like, no thanks. So they might not even get like the best coordinators. They're going to literally have to get creative and either get like the third or fourth best coordinator. It's like in the draft. It's like, is it really worth my first round pick taking the fourth best offensive tackle, right? Or they're just going to have to find that diamond in the rough, and that franchise has not proven that they can do that. And then even if they do, they have to be technically sound from an operations standpoint above that. So and again, like, people aren't going to want to go to a place if they're proven when they know that that's a mess of an organization.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things that both those guys, Steichen, who 2 years ago when he was in San Diego, I guess were they still in or L.A., wherever the hell they are, I don't think anybody was thinking of him as a possible head coaching candidate. Here he is 2 years later. He's running one of the top offenses in the league. You get a chance to be a head coach, and it's like, what are you supposed to do? I don't know. It's a weird spot, but both Gannon and Steichen are now interviewing for the same job, and they're now they can interview this week because they don't play, right?
I believe that, yes, they can interview this week.
Right. Geoff Mosher, football.
Do travel together? Do Gannon and Steichen travel together? They share notes.
I wouldn't even go to the interview. Like, I would turn it down. I'd be like, no, I'm good. Hey, John, you go, buddy. You go.
By the way, I think they could go together because I think Eagle fans would pay for their travel.
Not Shane.
At least Gannon.
Well, not Shane. Yeah, maybe Gannon.
All right.
Well, can you imagine Shane says, hey, I got the job, and John Gannon says, oh, man, I'm sorry to hear, brother. I hope
right? It's not a good thing.
Football at 4, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning. Listen to their insight on that game and the playoffs and everything else moving forward here. And, of course, the guys will be here all week long for Football at 4, getting us ready for the possible Eagles matchups and all these, potential coaching vacancies that could be happening. Moshe, appreciate it, man.
All right, guys, have a great one.